I did it. I finally did it. I beat Dark Souls.
Have you ever steered away from Dark Souls just because of how difficult people say it can be? Have you ever tried playing Dark Souls and given up before really getting anywhere because the game pinned you down without lube on the first date? Does the journey seem impossible because it is too hard an obstacle for any sane human being to overcome? I used to feel that way about Dark Souls myself until I finally decided that it is time to face my fear. After more than 10 years of toying with the idea, I finally decided to pull up my socks and jacket and play Dark Souls. For real.
I'm not even joking about this. This is serious. I'm serious. This whole situation is serious. Everything is serious.
I used to think games were easy. Tetris? No problem. Monopoly? No problem. Doom? Almost no problem. Super Mario The Lost Levels? Well, that game is unbeatable.
People who say it's possible are lying to us.
But then during one cloudy month, I decided to finally play and complete Dark Souls. I started off with hope in my heart, but soon after starting, I ran into a slight problem with the game. It is believed that before Hidetaka Miyazaki, the creator of Dark Souls, invented games, difficulty did not exist. Sure, games had difficulty settings, but a lot of it was superficial, offering no more than adding a few extra enemies or nerfing you while turning enemies into bullet sponges, and that is not what I call fun.
And neither does the dictionary.
When a game is so hard that it becomes nearly impossible, it loses the part where it is enjoyable and just feels like a chore. For many years, I believed Dark Souls to be one of these games. I mean, reviews complained about how difficult the game is, actual gamers praised it for its difficulty, and even the PC port was called the Prepare to Die version, due to it being so broken on release. The start of the game also didn't give me much confidence that I could make it through this journey. I ended up rage quitting a few times and restarting to try different classes, but nothing seemed to fix the experience. Until I finally realized and accepted a few things about the game. Coming to terms with these facts opened my eyes to another fact about the game that becomes more apparent the longer you play it.
What?
Don't get me wrong, the game is still as hard as Dark Souls, but it is not the impossible to get through wall people like to make it out to be. By continuously pushing forward, I started discovering something quite beautiful that I've seen very few times through my years of gaming. By catering to only one difficulty, Dark Souls gave the developers the freedom to tweak the world to a point where it is something marvelous, where nothing feels out of place. There is no enemy too strong to defeat, and no obstacle that can't eventually be overcome. I am grateful that I discovered this, because it allowed me to go on a journey unlike any other I've experienced before, in a world so beautiful and well built. When I finally made it to the end of the game, I had to sit back for a while and think about the experience.
What the hell just happened?
Once I finished the game, I went looking for answers and discovered a rabbit hole deeper than I could imagine. Throughout the game, there aren't many cutscenes, and NPCs that help to explain what is going on and why the world is the way it is are scarce and not very talkative. Most of the lore is explained during the opening scene of a game and can be completely missed if you don't pay attention. Once you start, you escape from your cell and get set free into this world that is much different from the one that was depicted in the opening of the game. The world is currently in the Age of Fire, but the Age of Fire is dwindling to an end. As a result of that, things have changed. What remains are empty shells of once mighty and prosperous kingdoms that have fallen from grace. Everything feels so eerie, as if the world is busy dying and rotting away. But damn, does the world look amazing. Now that you're set free into the world, you can either face the challenges and make something of yourself, or give up and end up as another Hollow. Trying to explain all the lore of the game would take more than just one video. Vati Vidya's channel is proof of that. Though the story is very seldom touched upon throughout the experience, there is a thoroughly fleshed out world that can be discovered through reading the description of items. The description sometimes gives you a little glimpse of what happened to a certain character and the world, but never reveal too much, leaving the player to try and figure out the gaps in what has occurred themselves. Some stories will make you rethink the way you perceive something, and others will even make you cry. This type of storytelling is why the community surrounding the lore is constantly active, debating events and coming up with new theories. I would, however, recommend a blind playthrough the first time. It made me come up with my own theories surrounding the lore and made my journey a little more unique. One boss in Dark Souls that I constantly hear people complain about is the Capra Demon. It is said to be quite a tough boss that destroys the dreams of many adventurers as it comes at you with two undead dogs at its side.
Spoiler alert!
This boss is feared as it hits hard and can be quite a bitch to deal with in the small space, along with its companion dogs that can stun you with their attacks. During my first playthrough, I somehow missed this boss and only found its location after I already cleared the demon ruins, which are filled with his Capra dudes, causing this boss encounter to be quite a laugh. Unfortunately, I didn't capture footage of the experience, but trust me, it happened.
I wouldn't lie to you. Pinky swear.
I experienced and ended up perceiving certain things in a different way than others did in their first playthrough of the game, just because I didn't follow any given path. Those types of special experiences are why I would recommend that you should play the game without a guide during your first playthrough. The first 2 times I tried playing Dark Souls, I ended up rage quitting because I followed the wrong path from Firelink Shrine in the beginning. But those experiences taught me that if I can't face the enemies in an area, I might be missing a step.
Who would have guessed?
That still didn't stop me from throwing my body at enemies a countless amount of times until I finally found a way to break through the unbreakable walls in my path. Once you finish the game, I would however recommend diving into the lore aspects of the world for your second playthrough as it changes so much about how you experience the game. You might even learn of a certain item you missed in an area that explains so much more, like who is Solaire actually? Why is Robin Hood and his merry men in one part? Or you might even discover that there are entire areas that you might have missed. I never got past the dragon on the bridge in my first playthrough. I never completed any Covenant related missions, and I never found Ash Lake. All these things gave me a reason to want to dive back into the game once I finished it, as it felt like I missed so much. I wanted to go explore more and discover items I missed, find out what is waiting for me in Ash Lake, and discover where the supposed painting is that has a world hidden in it. The more you dive into the theories and lore, the deeper the rabbit hole goes.
And the rabbit hole is pretty deep. Like, deeper than a Nickelback song.
The music and sound design create an atmosphere that very few other games manage to do. For a game that actually takes around 50 hours or more to play, unless you're a crazy person, the full soundtrack spans less than an hour and a half. Yet, it never felt lacking in the game. Throughout most of the game, there is no music playing. You feel like you're in this empty lost world with nothing but the sounds of your footsteps, the bashing of weapons, the clanging sound of a blacksmith's hammer in the distance, and the sexual moans when you get hit. When you reach certain parts where music finally starts playing, it is usually a memorable moment. I will never forget the calming music of Firelink Shrine, or the piano tune that plays during one of the big fights in the game. I mean, just listen to this. I just can't get it out of my head.
Please send help.
Every boss encounter feels so much more important and engaging due to the added music in the fight. It makes those moments stand out more compared to the rest of the journey. It makes them feel special. If you're into epic sounding music that ranges from a simple piano tune all the way to a full-blown orchestra, then I would recommend giving the soundtrack a listen, as they did an amazing job with it. Visually, the game looks amazing, and it is not necessarily due to the quality of textures. There are landscapes with huge mountains and magnificent buildings in the distance, where just a few rays of sunlight peer through a cloudy sky. Seeing a huge structure in the distance looks beautiful, And once I discovered that I could go to most of those locations, it excited me even more when I could see something interesting far away.
This pillow is here for no reason other than decoration.
The locations in Dark Souls feel like they're built on top of each other. Locations stretch high into the mountains and low into the depths. Part of the beauty of the adventure is that you can go on a journey that feels like it goes on for ages, and then all of a sudden, in the midst of all the chaos, you find a shortcut that leads you back to the safety of Firelink Shrine.
They can't get me here. They can't get me here.
There are huge medieval Gothic-inspired structures that can be explored throughout the kingdom, which are so huge that you can get lost in them and sometimes feel like there is no way out. But there is, so don't worry. There are places like libraries, small towns, forests, and church-like structures to explore. Then you get to what lies below the surface, and you discover places like towns built upon poisonous lakes, the depths of what seems to be hell, and even places so dark that you can't see anything in front of you. The environments are so diverse, and it always amazed me how different the areas are to one another, while still feeling like one coherent world. You usually don't get to take in all the beauty and level of detail some locations offer you until you clear out the area and just take a minute to pay attention to the world and not just its dangers.
Wow, would you look at that view? Oh, come on.
NPCs help to add to the gloomy feeling of the world, with some starting full of hope, only to lose their sanity as the game progresses. Others used to be adventurers like yourself, who seem to have given up on saving the world, or the idea that the world can be saved altogether, and instead have found a different purpose to exist in the world, to stop them from losing themselves and hollowing. This constant, cynical attitude helps to add to the feeling that saving the world is hopeless, and nothing you do can change that. All of this lore and all these awesome landscapes are great, but they would mean very little if it didn't feel like an achievement to witness it. This is where the difficulty and gameplay shine the most. Having a challenging journey always makes the destination feel like a rewarding experience. Getting to know the world and its layout is also one of the most important things you need to learn to do, as there is no map or guide in the game. To get anywhere, you're going to need to face a lot of enemies that could be hiding behind every corner. In some instances, if you manage to learn the layout of the map and the placement of enemies, you could just end up running past all the enemies that stand in your way and haul ass to the next boss.
Next time.
When you do need to engage with enemies, you're going to need to get comfortable with your playstyle and buckle down, as a lot of them can be quite challenging. You will need to learn their movements and attack patterns in order to survive. A lot of enemies have a long wind up to an attack, or you might even be able to tell where they're going to attack, which gives you an opportunity to get out of the way. Some are faster and will require you to block some attacks. Mastering combat against all the enemies is also not just a walk in the park, as there are so many different enemies, each with a different feel to their combat. There are ninjas that do flips and backstab you, giant armored enemies with big shields, dogs, lizards, trees, ghosts, snake people, skeletons, moths, creatures that hit you, creatures that throw things at you, creatures that shoot you, and so many more. Even a basic hollow enemy, or humans, can have multitudes of ways to attack you, depending on their weapons and armor. And just a bit of advice, don't mess with the Onion Knight. Staying alive in this crazy world seems like a daunting or even impossible task to overcome. But it's not. Just be ready for anything.
Psst, hey, just between the two of us. Dark Souls has an easy mode.
At the core of Dark Souls, it is still an RPG game. You collect souls from slaying enemies, and then use those souls to buy things or level up your character. So you could potentially overlevel yourself for most challenges. If you play carefully, there won't be a need for grinding. But sometimes when you get stuck, it might be wise to grind for a few souls to level up your character in specific areas, to get stronger, or to use better equipment and spells. This is, however, not always necessary if you end up finding your playstyle and finally click with the combat. There are people out there in the universe who do playthroughs where they are so precise they don't even level up.
Those people are psychopaths.
Many people have many different ways of coming to understand the gameplay and clicking with it. For me, it was coming to terms with the fact that I'm going to die. A lot.
It's okay. I'm fine. Dying is just part of life.
Once I got over the fact that I was going to die, I started pushing forward bit by bit. Each time I overcame an obstacle on my road, I understood things a bit better. Every time I got killed, I tried to avoid doing what I did wrong until I found a way to move past that roadblock. The game gives you many different weapons and armor sets to find. You get heavier armor that helps with defense and light armor that is less defensive but gives you more movement speed. There are daggers, straight swords, great swords, katanas, other swords, axes, hammers, first weapons, spears, halberds, whips, bows, crossbows, and even weapons that grant you the ability to do magic. Each of the weapon classes has its own fighting style, with some of the weapons even being unique to their type of weapon. This gives you a lot of options and flexibility when it comes to finding a playstyle that suits you best. I used a spear that an enemy dropped near the start of the game, and found that if I can keep my distance, I can take care of most enemies using this weapon. I also figured out that if I used the spear as a two-handed weapon, I could kill most normal enemies with about 2 hits. Besides, shields are for soft people. This worked quite well for me in the beginning, but it was still not perfect. Then I found this Black Knight dude just chilling in one of the early parts of the game, and there was an item just past him, which I naturally had to get. This initiated one of the toughest battles I faced to that point. The enemy was quite deadly, and he could reach further than my strategy allowed for. I had to face him numerous times with him crushing me every time. I even rage quit a few times. I would take the cartridge out of my Switch and put it away, and start playing another game, because I was just done with the bullshit. But then, I found myself thinking about the challenge while playing other games. I kept going back to it to the point where I perfected my run-up to the Black Knight. I tried everything I could and failed numerous times, until one run where I finally managed to dodge at the right times and attack when I had the right opening, and took down this roadblock. Upon killing the Black Knight, I was blessed with its sword, which presented a fighting style I enjoyed, and I ended up using it till the end of the game. I would wear the lightest armor I could to give me the maximum movability possible. I would use both hands to tightly grab onto the shaft of my new sword and strike before the enemy had a chance. If I managed to take down the enemy before it could hit me, I didn't need to slow myself down with heavy armor. When enemies were still faster than me, I would utilize my dodge and strike when I had an opening. When enemies were too far away to reach safely, I would snipe them with my bow. I know this is not the best way to play the game, and I've even read many comments on many forums where some fans of the series would say that this is the wrong way to play and this strategy is crap. But you know what?
Fuck him.
If something in the game works better for you, then go with it. There is no right way to face the challenges, only some wrong ways. If there was only one correct way of facing the game, then why did we get mechanics where you have different speeds? Or why can you hold a weapon with 2 hands? Or why is there even such a variety of weapons and attacks? And how do speedruns exist? It is your adventure and your challenge to overcome. Whichever way you choose to overcome the challenge cannot be dictated by someone else. So enjoy the journey.
Like Miley Cyrus said,
The journey is usually the part that you remember.
I know the game might not be for everyone. You might have the worst time of your life. But remember that the challenge is not impossible. My first video about how easy Dark Souls is can be seen as proof of that, as the gameplay footage used in the video was not actually me playing.
what?
It was my cameraman.
Hi.
A sophisticated gamer who plays online chess. Once in a while, he might play a racing game or a shooting game when he visits, but he rarely picks up a remote control and would rather go fishing. Due to my stupid muscle memory I developed through my first playthrough, I struggled to do badly in the first part of the game, as the enemies were too predictable. So I ended up throwing my cameraman into the deep end and let him start his first playthrough of Dark Souls. He managed to figure out how to block, how to clear the starting area of the game, somehow chose the correct starting path at Firelink Shrine, and made it all the way to the Taurus Demon in less than 2 hours. As proven countless times before, Dark Souls is not impossible to beat. If you haven't given it a try, then I would say that it is well worth a try as long as you're up for the challenge. If you played it before and gave up on the journey, then I would recommend giving it another try while taking what I've said into consideration. You might just not have been ready for your journey back then. I sure wasn't the first few times, but when I finally decided to face the challenge, I discovered a game that became one of my favorites so far. You will die, you will fail, and you will cry, but you need to keep getting back up, because Dark Souls is one of those experiences that is worth it. If you do decide to face the challenge, then I wish you the best of luck, and remember,
Don't go hollow. Also, leave a like and subscribe in order to achieve your dreams. Or whatever.